I'm Phil Constantine. In this edition of Travels with Phil, September 8, 1900 begins as a hurricane surges across Galveston, Texas, killing around 8,000 people. Let me show you where Galveston is. It's on the Gulf of Mexico. It is a barrier island just off the coast of Texas, not too far from Houston, about 50 miles. It runs about 27 miles along just south of Galveston Bay. The 1900 Galveston hurricane, also known as the Great Galveston Hurricane and the Galveston Flood, and known locally as the Great Storm of 1900 or the 1900 Storm, is the deadliest natural disaster in United States history. It left between 6,000 and 12,000 fatalities in the United States. The number most cited in official reports is 8,000. Most of these deaths occurred in and near Galveston, Texas. At the time of the 1900 hurricane, the highest point in the city of Galveston was only 8.7 feet or 2.7 meters above sea level. The hurricane brought with it a storm surge of over 15 feet or 4.6 meters that washed over the entire island. In addition to the number killed, the storm destroyed about 7,000 buildings of all types in Galveston, which included 3,636 demolished homes. Every dwelling in the city suffered some degree of damage. The hurricane left approximately 10,000 people in the city homeless out of a total population of fewer than 38,000. The storm system peaked as a Category 4 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 145 miles per hour or 235 kilometers per hour on September 8th. Early on the next day, it made landfall to the south of Houston and southwest of Galveston. Fatalities occurred in other states, including 15 in Ohio, 2 in Illinois, 2 in New York, 1 in Massachusetts, and 1 in Missouri. The remnants of the hurricane caused at least 52 deaths and possibly as many as over 200 deaths in Canada, mostly due to sunken vessels near Newfoundland and the French territory of St. Pierre. Throughout its path, the storm caused more than $35.4 million in damage, which would be over $1.3 billion in today's money. Once transportation was reestablished with Galveston, the newspaper coverage was massive. It was covered by newspapers around the United States and, in fact, around the world. You can just see some of the headlines here from various ones listing the dead, listing the damage, how many people were killed, lots of pictures. And speaking of pictures, let's look at some movies shot by the Thomas Edison Company, yes, the famous inventor. There's some discrepancy as to whether or not he was there or not, but these are some of the earliest disaster movies ever made. You can see the powerhouse here, the damage, and this is one of the reasons why it took so long to get everything going again, is because the city was without power. Their ability to generate it just wasn't there. This is wreckage along the waterfront. Sped this up just a little bit. It's a slow panorama. You can see one of the wharfs there. That's a capsized ship right there. People on boats were also killed in the hurricane itself. And one of the most perhaps gruesome jobs out there was searching for people that were still alive, but the thousands and thousands of dead bodies all over the city. Some of them were just taken out to sea and dumped. Many were burned in large funeral pyres around the city. So let's take a look at the track of the storm. It didn't match predictions. That's why there was very little warning or the chance for evacuations. You can see the map here from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It was first spotted out in the Atlantic, and it started heading in toward the Gulf of Mexico in general. Now, the U.S. Weather Service, or what it was called back then, thought it might go north and go across Florida and lose some power. But unfortunately, it did not go across Florida. In fact, it sort of jumped across the straits there between Cuba and Florida itself, and it continued on into the Gulf of Mexico. Again, they were still expecting it to go further north, so they weren't predicting much for Texas at that particular time. But as it continued in, it did come across the coastline just south of Galveston, and if you don't know anything about hurricanes, the area just north and east of the eye has the highest winds and water conditions, and that's why Galveston was so just swamped. Now, another thing it did, which was unusual, it kept going north across Texas, came across Oklahoma, Missouri. That's why there were deaths in Missouri, Illinois, and it continued on across the Great Lakes and into Canada. Now, normally there aren't many hurricanes that come into the eastern side of Canada from the United States. Some of them they will come along the coastline, but they seldom come straight across. That's why there were so many people killed up around Newfoundland, because they were not expecting a storm to be coming in from the west. In response to the storm, 3 engineers designed and oversaw plans to raise the Gulf of Mexico shoreline on Galveston Island by 17 feet or 5.2 meters and erect a 10-mile or 16-kilometer-long seawall. There are lots of records for the 1900 hurricane, particularly stereographic or stereoscopic pictures, which can be looked at through an old viewer like a Viewmaster if you're an older folks. And the Library of Congress has an amazing collection which you can see online. But Galveston has survived. It has thrived. It's now a nice city. It has a seawall. But with all the improvements, they're still never going to forget the 1900 Great Storm. And a final thought, I worked offshore on oil wells in the Gulf of Mexico in the late 1970s. We actually had a hurricane develop around our rig. There was no way we could get off, didn't have much warning. So I can appreciate a little bit about the feelings people had in Galveston, but not really, because they had very little warning, and to see these massive waves growing and growing and growing had to be absolutely terrible. So deepest sympathies to all of the families who suffered in this event, even if it was over 100 years ago. You can learn a lot more by looking at the links in the description field below. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please feel free to make comments below as long as the language is family friendly. And if you like this video, please click on the thumbs up button below. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking on the circle with my picture in it in the lower right-hand corner of the video. The arrow is pointing at it now. And once you have subscribed, you can be notified of when I have a new video posted by clicking on the bell icon in the description field below the video. Thanks again for watching.